Welcome back. All right, we're in our last third of the course now, and we're going to do something a little bit different. So far, almost every single time we start a new topic, I introduce a new theory, a new system of ethics, like utilitarianism, like deontology, like egoism, and I tell you what the source is, what the standards. We go through all that stuff. We're going to do something a little bit different this time. We're not going to do theoretical ethics in which we try to solve what is the right thing to do, why is that the right thing to do it in such an abstract and detached way. Today, we're going to look at something called applied ethics. In short, we're going to take some of what hopefully we've learned over the course of the semester so far, and we're going to actually apply all of that together and see how a specific circumstance in the world today should be dealt with. What is that circumstance? It has to do with the question of equality, the question of wealth, and what should a society do to balance those things of wealth and equality. So we're going to look at some specific terms. Let me unpack those for you. When I talk about resources, I'm basically talking about money, wealth. It could be land, real estate, capital of other sorts, but if you just basically think, oh, resources, that's money, that's cash, that's someone's wealth, you'll be fine. Now, when we talk about the redistribution of wealth, what we mean by that is, as you see, specifically taking the resources and wealth from who? From the wealthy, from the rich. So those are the ones who the money comes from. And then we turn around and we give them to the poor, the impoverished, the least well off. And we do that specifically for the reason of trying to make society more equal, more balanced, to smooth out the inequalities. That's what we mean by redistribution of wealth. We're redistributing some of the wealth from the wealthy to the poor, trying to limit inequality. Those are the terms that we're going to be using. Now, this could go in many different directions. I'm going to try to keep it relatively simple. I'm only going to look at three interpretations of how society should distribute their resources. Two of them are kind of extreme. One of them, for example, strict equality, that's on one end of the spectrum, the one that says we need to keep everyone as equal as we possibly can. And then there's one on the totally opposite end of the spectrum, untaxed inequality. I realize some of these terms are a little bit clunky. What do we mean by untaxed inequality? Well, first of all, when we say inequality, what that means is, as opposed to strict equality, this one says we're not going to try to keep everyone the same. We realize some people are going to be wealthy. We realize some people are going to be poor. And we're not going to try to fix that and make everyone close. We're going to let the wealthy be wealthy. We're not going to try to take it away. And we're not going to try to necessarily prop up the poor every chance we get. And specifically, we're not going to take any extra taxes away from the wealthy in order to try to help those that are less well off. So for example, if the taxes are everyone pays a 10% income tax, then if you're making $100,000 a year, you're going to pay 10% of that. And if you're making $1,000 a year, you're only going to pay 10% of that. So everyone pays taxes. When I say untaxed, I don't mean no one pays taxes. Everyone pays taxes, but they pay the same percentage. They pay the same rate. That's untaxed inequality. Number one and number three are worlds apart. Number two kind of tries to strike a bit of a balance between the two. So it's also going to allow for inequality. It says we're going to allow some people to have more than others. However, the more successful you are financially, the more we're going to tax you, specifically so that that money can go to help those who are not as financially successful as you are. So just for a quick example, if under this system someone is making $1,000 in a year, then they may only pay a couple of bucks in taxes. However, if someone is making $100,000 every single year, then they may pay significantly more, 30%, 40%. I don't know what it is, but it's going to be more, not just in total, but a higher rate, a higher tax bracket, a higher overall percentage than those who have the least amount of money. So those are the three systems, and this by no means exhausts them. There's many others in between what we're looking at, but I want to keep it fairly simple. Let's look at these three, And we'll let them kind of broadly represent their group. And let's see which of these seems to be the best for society, which one seems to be the most just and fair for the civilization. So let's start with looking at the first one, strict equality. Now, as I've already said, this one tries to say we want to, as much as we can, keep everyone the same. We don't want to have super rich over here. We don't want to have destitute poor over there. We don't want to have a middle class kind of hovering in between. We want to kind of keep everyone on equal financial grounds. Well, why do they want to do that? Why is equality of value? Well, I'm not going to take the time to go into this argument in great depth, but I'll kind of give you a quick and dirty understanding of what motivates that for the strict egalitarians. Here's what they're going to start off with. They're going to start off with this belief and say, we believe that every person, every human being is born with equal moral value. Now, it's important that we're stressing its moral value. That doesn't mean everyone is exactly the same. That doesn't mean, for example, that everyone is equally intelligent. Doesn't mean that everyone's going to be equally beautiful, like me. Doesn't mean that everyone's going to have all the same abilities. No, people have different talents. People have different abilities. If everyone in the class were to line up and race, some of us would be a lot faster than others, and probably everyone would be faster than me. So we're not saying that everyone is exactly the same. What we're saying as human beings, everyone has dignity. Everyone is born with the same intrinsic value. Just in virtue of being a human being, you have certain value. And this was very different from what people used to think back in the Middle Ages. If you were of the nobility, if you were, say, in the family of the king, or of a baron, or someone with a title and lands, you were really important. People had to get out of your way. However, if you were born to the peasants, then you were dirt. You were a tool for the wealthy and for the rulers, the kings, the nobles to use. Your life literally did not count. So that's what this is denying. We don't have the upper class. We don't have the lower class. We don't have people that are worth a lot. We don't have people that are worth, whose lives are worth little. Everyone is born with equal moral value. That's what they're starting with. So you might kind of ask yourself, do I go along with that? Do I say it doesn't matter if someone's born on the north side or the south side, they're both people, they both get the same respect. Doesn't matter if someone's born into a wealthy family or a poor family. Doesn't matter if someone's born into an educated family or a working class family. Everyone is born with equal moral value. Do you think so? Well, if so, then you're on track, at least for now, for strict equality. They're going to go on and they're going to say, okay, if you're with us with number one, then you're going to say, no, everyone is born with equal moral value. What does that mean? That means no one is naturally is a key word here, naturally entitled to more than anyone else. Again, back in the Middle Ages, if you were born into the nobility and the wealthy, everyone had to get out of your way if you wanted to come into some establishment. If you wanted to go into, say, the cathedral or something like that, you didn't have to wait in line. You didn't have to get whatever seat was left. You took the best stuff. Why? Because you deserved it. Why did you deserve it? Because you were high-born. You were just entitled to it. You were better than those dirty people out there. Well, the strict egalitarians are saying, no, that's not true. You're not better than them. Are you richer than them? Sure. Do you have more wealth than them? Of course you do. But does that make you a better person? No. And since you're no better a person than they are, neither are you naturally entitled to more just in virtue of your blood, just in virtue of where you were born or what your family circumstances are. Everyone is born free and equal, and everyone is naturally entitled to the same basic abilities. So this is where some people start to get a little bit suspicious. Point 3 says, now because of everything we've seen so far, allowing some people to have not just enough, but more than enough, when others have less than enough, is unfair. Now, to unpack this just a bit, when we say more than enough, we don't by that mean some people are like a 30-year-old adult eats more than a 4-year-old little girl or something like that. We're not talking about portion size or something like that. We're talking about having everything you need and then more. And many times more on top of that and more on top of that. For example, think of Bill Gates. Do you think he has enough money to live well? And the answer is, oh yes, he has plenty of money to live well. Do you think he has more than enough money to live well? And the answer is he has oodles and oodles and oodles more than enough to live well. He's got a super abundance of cash. Okay. Now, are there some people that don't simply have enough? They actually have not enough. They're actually not able to pay their bills, not able to buy the food, not able to pay for the shelter they need. They are depraved. Not depraved, excuse me. They are deprived. My elite nobility status is coming through here. Those depraved people. They're deficient, not in their moral character, but in their resources and their wealth. Now, here's what strict equality says. When there are some good and decent people who literally do not have enough, then it is unfair when there are people without enough to allow some people to have much more than enough. If some people are overabundant in their wealth and resources, while others are deficient in their wealth and resources, that's not right. That needs to be fixed. How do we fix it? Step 4. All wealth should be redistributed to maximize equality and fairness, at least until everyone has enough. Once there's enough to go around, once no one is starving, once everyone has shelter, once everyone's basic needs are met so they can live a decent life, then we can talk about letting some people have more than others if they're good at the financial game or whatnot. But at least until then, no one should be allowed to splurge and waste resources on themselves when there are others who are literally dying of easily preventable diseases because they simply can't afford to go to the doctor, can't afford to go to the hospital. And if you think about places like Haiti in the Caribbean, think about places like Sudan in Africa and many other places, those people exist. So for these reasons that we've just seen, they're going to say the moral, the right, the appropriate thing to do is to take all the wealth and the resources in the world and try to make sure that everyone has enough. Let's not let anyone have more than enough, more than they really need to have good well-being, when there are people that don't even have enough to have a decent life. That's the argument for strict equality. And we'll go on, we'll look at some responses to it, but just so far, does it move you at all? Do you kind of look at that and say, well, yeah, why do we live in a world where some people are filthy rich and other people are living in filth on the street? You know, one real quick example, I think I've said this before, the United States all by itself produces enough food to feed the entire globe every single year. Yet the vast majority, I won't say the vast majority, huge portions of that food we throw away. Should we really be allowed to buy so much more than we need when there are other people in the world who are literally dying of hunger? What do you think of this? Well, let's look at some objections to strict equality. Here's the first one. It's pretty obvious. It says, trying to make sure everyone has enough is a nice goal, but what if there's simply not enough to go around? What if we don't have enough resources? And I'm going to use an example here where resources don't actually mean money. Resources in this case will mean medicine. So here's an example. Suppose we have 10 patients who are dying of malaria, but there's only enough medicine to save 3 of them. You need to have a certain sufficient dose. And if we give a sufficient dose of this medicine to any 3 of the patients, we don't have enough for the last 7. Now, if we're really going to be strict egalitarians, then we're going to have to say, all right, here's what we have to do. We need to make sure that all 10 patients get an equally insufficient amount. They all get less than a sufficient share of the medicine, even though all will then die. But they'll die fairly. Why? It's not fair because everyone is born of equal moral value. No one is naturally entitled to any more than anyone else. It's just not fair to pick some and say, we're going to let you live. We're going to give all our precious resources to you to save your life, and we're going to let these other people die. That's not fair. So the only thing we can do fair is give everyone an equally insufficient amount, and they'll all be equally miserable, and then they'll all be equally dead. So the objection comes out and says, guys, sometimes when you're rigid on this, when you really say we've got to be fair and equal, we can't give some more than others, this type of strict equality can make everyone equally miserable and no one better off. This can be a real problem when there's just not enough to go around, whether it's not enough money, whether it's not enough food, whether it's not enough medicine. Are you really committed to always giving an equal amount, even if it's not enough for anyone? This is the most common and the most often objection that is leveled against strict equality. However, there's a fairly easy response to this. All the strict egalitarian has to say is, hey, I'm not that hardcore. Okay, guys, in a situation like this, in a lifeboat situation where we got to save someone or everyone could die, all right, in emergencies, we will forego equality. In a situation where we only have enough medicine to save 3 of the 10 dying patients, then we'll have to somehow pick 3 and save them. How? I don't know. Maybe it'll be for the children. Maybe we'll have a lottery. We'll do something, but we're not going to demand strict equality when there's just not enough. However, when there is enough, when there's enough food to feed everyone, when there's enough money out there to give everyone a decent place to live, then we can afford to be strict in our equality. Then we can afford to say, no, you cannot have 100 times what you need when other people don't even have half of what they need. That's a way they can respond to this objection of insufficient resources. So I'll just leave it to you. Do you think this objection is serious enough, or do you think that they've got a good response against it? Let me go ahead and bring up one other objection. And this doesn't matter. There could be plenty of resources. There could be not enough resources. There could be more. It doesn't matter. This one is more just in principle. It says everything in life comes with a cost. Not just things that you buy, but if you decide to pursue one course of life, you're going to be sacrificing your opportunities to accomplish other things. So likewise, they say there is a cost to focusing on equality. Really, there is? What is that cost? Is the cost some people being incredibly wealthy? Is the cost no one is dying of hunger in the streets? No, not necessarily. The cost is, as you try to focus on making everyone financially equal, they say there's going to be a de-emphasis, and you're going to have to give up some level, some amount of personal liberty. This is what we call an inverse relationship. As you focus on one side, you have to give up the other side. And by the way, the reverse is also true. Presumably, if you focus on giving people liberty, then you're going to be sacrificing social equality. Now, why can you only focus on one at the expense of the other? Why can't you try to focus on both? Well, let me give you an example that kind of makes that point. Now, I can't use people in class, so I've decided to recruit my own actors for this example. So let me introduce you here to Miss Thrifty. Her co-star is going to be Mr. Sloth. And then what? Okay, guys, I can hear you already. This happens every semester. I show Mr. Sloth on the screen, and people look at Mr. Sloth, and then kind of out of the side of their eye, they turn and start looking at me sideways. And then back at Mr. Sloth again. Finally, someone raises their hand and says, Wilford, is this, is he supposed to, guys, do you see any suspenders on Mr. Sloth? Thank you, I rest my case. That should take care of it. So we've got Miss Thrifty, we've got Mr. Sloth, and we have $100,000. This is not like that picture of money I showed you before, where there was a single $100 bill and then it was backed up by a bunch of ones. This is the real stuff. Now we've got lots of money. So here's what we want to try to do. We want to try to have Thrifty and Sloth be financially equal without sacrificing their personal liberty. Can we do that? Well, let's see if we can. First of all, just so you know, there are at least two types of equality. The first one is called collective ownership, and the second one is called evenly divided ownership. So the reason that I'm showing you both of these is just to explain that if one of them doesn't work, maybe the other one will. We don't only have one notion of equality. So what do we mean by collective equality? By collective equality, basically everything is owned in common. Everything belongs equally to everyone. What would that look like in this case? Well, let's suppose that both Thrifty and Sloth are giving joint ownership of a $100,000 account. They both equally own every single penny in that account. It's like they're married. That's what we mean by collective ownership. They both have full ownership of the whole thing. And guys, you cannot get more equal than this. This is the absolute paramount of equality. So we've got equality. That's step one. We've got a check mark. Do we also have liberty? Well, let's see. Suppose that Miss Thrifty has been thinking about what to do with this money, and she goes up to Sloth and says, here, listen to me, Sloth. I know what we should do. I've been looking at these tech businesses. I've been looking at these upstart companies and various other wise places for us to invest our money. And I want to invest in Apple corporations. I want to invest. She goes through all these places that she can buy parts of the business and invest in them. And she says, let's let the money stay there. Let's let it mature. They're on a great trajectory. And at the right time, we'll sell. We'll take out our money. We'll have 10 times what we started with. And we'll both be living like kings. That's my plan. What do you think, Sloth? And suppose that Sloth says, Apple. I hate apples. I want to invest in Twinkie corporations and bonbons and Coca-Cola. I mean, after all, those things are, like hydrogen, oxygen, and a good TV remote. Those are the essentials of life. Okay, so we had a disagreement on how Thrifty and Sloth want to spend this money that belongs equally and entirely to both of them. Who gets to decide? Who gets to break the tie? And the answer is, if it really is collective ownership, no one can. Neither Thrifty nor Sloth are going to be free to use 1 cent of that money unless or until the other one grants their permission. So that means they certainly have equality. You cannot be more equal than this, but do they have liberty? Well, here's the question. Can you do what you want with what is supposed to belong to you? And the answer is no, they cannot. Thrifty cannot do what she wants with the money that is supposed to be hers. Sloth cannot do what he wants with the money that is supposed to belong to him. Why? Because the other person can always veto their decision. Now, that's with only two people. Imagine if this $100,000 was split amongst all 30 people in our class. And we got to spend it any way we want, as long as everyone agreed every time. Even just one person can veto a whole idea, can say, nope, you're not going to spend it that way. Would you really consider yourself at liberty to do what you want with what was said to be your money? And that's only 30 people. What if we had it for the entire college? What if we had it for the whole town of San Antonio? I mean, if we're talking about making society equal, you can't make society more equal than saying everyone owns everything in common. But then, who gets to decide how it's used? And the moment you give one person the tiebreaker, the moment you give one group or one person a chance to say, you get to decide when there's controversy, then those other people aren't equal anymore. So yes, collective ownership will give you full and entire financial equality, but both of them lose personal liberty to do what they want with their own stuff. Now, maybe you're saying, well, Clifford, I wasn't really thinking that everything belongs to everyone. I wasn't really thinking there's no more mine, there's no more yours, everything is ours. That's not what I had in mind. I had in mind something much simpler like this. Let's take that $100,000 and let's chop it in half. Let's give $50,000 over here to Thrifty, the other $50,000 to Sloth, and they both have their own money. But because it's the exact same amount, they're both still equal. Now we got equality, the same amount of money for both. And because it's their own and no one else owns it, then they can do what they want. No one else can tell them no. Haven't we got close enough to equality here? And haven't we preserved their liberty to do what they want with their own stuff? Well, it starts off very promising. So what do you think Thrifty will do with her share? Well, kind of like we talked about last time, she's good at this business and financial markets game. She's going to see opportunities. She's going to grab them. She's going to, within the law, the right way, she's going to do everything she can to take her $50,000 that she was given and cause it to grow and bloom and flourish. And she is going to become very, very wealthy. Some people are just really good at growing money. That's a talent. How do you guys think Sloth is doing? Well, Sloth's just not that good at this game. Now, with a name like Sloth, you'd think that he would become just wasteful, squander his money. Maybe he does. But maybe he's not even just going out and blowing it all on lottery tickets and whatever, blowing it all on Twinkies. Maybe he's trying to invest in what he thinks will be good business opportunities. Maybe he's going out and says, boy, I think those 8-tracks, they're going to be the next big thing. Let me just put all my money in there. And man, that crashed and burned. And it wasn't even necessarily his fault. He was just unlucky. It could be that he's just kind of a poor businessman. It could be bad luck happens. But however it works, he becomes impoverished. I'm sorry, Sloth. I wish it hadn't happened, but I guess, that's a possibility when you can do whatever you want with your money. You might do really well and strike it rich like Thrifty did, or you might just bomb out. But I guess that at least they both still have their liberty, and we had equality, right? Well, we had equality. But notice it's gone now. In fact, we actually have more inequality now than we did when we started. Why? Because Thrifty has become extra wealthy. Sloth has become even more impoverished. So yes, we have preserved their personal liberty. But as soon as you let people do what they want with their stuff, some are going to do better than others. The only way you're going to keep everyone financially equal is if you force them to stay equal. But if you force them to stay equal, you're not letting them do what they want with their stuff. And if they're not able to do that, then they don't have liberty anymore. Now, the whole point of this, and don't get too excited, this is not the conclusion of the entire lesson. This is just the conclusion of strict egalitarianism as we've reviewed it. This is not to say equality is bad. Don't vote for anyone who's trying to talk about it. I'm not saying that. All I'm saying is everything in life has a cost. Equality has a cost. Liberty has a cost. So just be aware of that when you're trying to determine what is most valuable for a society. If a nation, if a society wants to promote resource equality, equality of wealth, they can do that. However, it really looks like they're going to have to sacrifice some amount of personal liberty. And like I said, the reverse is also probably true. So just have that in mind. How much, where in that balance should it be struck? How much equality do we allow? How much liberty do we sacrifice? It's a difficult question. It's something you need to kind of think about. So again, not to say pick one side, ignore the other, just to say be aware of the balance, be aware of the trade-offs, and know what you think is important. Know why you value one side more than the other. Now, as we roll on to the second of these three, the one that tries to strike a compromise, taxed inequality, they're going to say, I think we've found a nice balance between equality and liberty. I think we found that sweet spot in there. How does it work? We've already explained it, so we don't need to go too much further. Basically, it says, all right, we're going to allow you to become as wealthy as you legally can. You can't break the law. You can't go Al Capone out there and start shaking people down. But within the legal bounds of society, there's no cap on wealth. We're not going to say you can only get $1 million and then you can't get any more. You can get as much wealth as you legally and morally can. However, just realize that the wealthier you become, the more we're going to tax you, the higher we're going to tax you. Why? Is it because we don't like you and we're trying to punish you, you awful, filthy, rich person? No, it's not that. It's because since you have so much more money than so many other people, you are in the best position to help those who need it the most. So in the case of what we were looking at last time, Thrifty becomes fantastically wealthy. Good for her. But we're going to tax her a greater amount of money, and we're going to take a large portion of that extra money in the taxes, and we're going to give it to those who need it most, like, for example, Mr. Sloth. And isn't this a good compromise? No one gets everything they want, but everyone gets something. So Thrifty isn't as wealthy as she could be. She'd be even more wealthy if we didn't tax her more. But she's no longer being held equal. She's allowed to become quite rich. On the other hand, with Sloth, well, he's no longer keeping up with Thrifty. He's now got less money than she does and a lot of the rest of society does. But at least he's no longer just in need and in want and left to his own. At least now there's going to be someone to help him. You can kind of build a social safety net with this redistribution from the wealthy to the poor. That's taxed inequality. I probably already told you everything I have on this slide, so this may be a quick slide. That's right. People can earn as much wealth as they legitimately can. Just realize the more wealth you gain, the higher you're going to pay in taxes, specifically for the purpose of benefiting the poor, the least well off among us. What do you guys think about this? And by the way, in case you were wondering, yes, this is not perfect. This is not a perfect match, but it's a lot closer to the way that the United States society works. We have what is called a progressive income tax. What does that mean? The more you earn, the higher tax rates you pay. What is the purpose of that? Well, a portion of it, that's not the whole thing, but a portion of it is to go to help those that are in the greatest need. Do you like that idea? Does it sound good to you? Well, one thing that some people worry about, and maybe none of you are worried, maybe you say, sounds good to me, I like it, let's go. And that's fine if you want to, but what some people worry about is, some people are going to take advantage of that safety net. If you've ever seen what are called the trapeze artists, that's where you go to the circus or whatnot, and you have those people doing the high wire act, swinging back and forth, flipping, catching one another. They almost always have a safety net below them, which, at least in my opinion, makes the whole act entirely not worth watching. The only reason I would want to watch trapeze artists fly and jump around up there is to see if any of them fall. But anyway, that's just me. If they fall, they don't have to splat. They can be caught, they can be okay. And in the same way, in society, if you're out working hard, doing the best you can, trying, and you just get bad luck, your business got wiped out when the coronavirus just shut down all kinds of service places. It's not your fault. Well, at least now there's a safety net to help you out. Most people say, I'm not opposed to that. I'm not opposed to helping out people who are trying their best, who are doing everything they can, and just tragedy strikes. They're in trouble through no fault of their own. Most people, not all, most people say, I can live with that. But what they're worried about is the people who don't really try, the people who could do better but just don't care. They're not using this as a safety net. They're reclining in it like it's a hammock. Very briefly, I had a great uncle. He wasn't that great, but he was my dad's uncle who kind of was like this. He got part of the GI Bill for being at the very, very end of World War II, never fought, never deployed. It was basically over by the time that he had signed his papers. However, that allowed him to get a lot of financial assistance for going to college. And he thought about that a little bit, came up with a scheme. He had no interest in college. He had no interest in education, getting a degree. But he realized if he signed up for this, and he signed up for a bunch of classes, said, I'm going to have to pay this much money for books. I've got all these costs and prices, that he could actually make money off the taxpayers and just blow off the classes. Now, once in a while, he'd go to a class. He'd sit in. If he found it interesting, he might listen or even throw in his 2 cents once in a while. But he never did any studying. He never bought any books. He never took a test, never took a quiz, never actually did any work. Just did whatever he wanted the whole semester, getting money off of taxpayers meant to help service personnel. Well, after his first semester, when he absolutely failed all his classes, he was put on probation, and they said, you better clean up your act or you're going to be kicked out of school. Did he care? No, did the exact same thing, got more money. And then after the second semester, they said, you're out of the program. We're not helping anymore. And he says, well, that's 2 semesters worth of money that I wouldn't have had if I hadn't done that. Let me find another scam to follow. That's what people are worried about here. There's going to be some fraud. There's going to be some abuse. And I'm sorry, I don't know of any way to filter that out. Be nice if we could, but there's always going to be some of that. That's just the nature of people. But I guess the question is, yes, we want to limit it as much as we can. We want to make sure that the people who are getting help need the help. They're not just mooching off of everyone else. But is it worth it to allow some people to engage in fraud if in doing so we actually do help and perhaps save and preserve others, hopefully more people who really do need it? Is the trade-off worth it? Again, everything's got a price. Do you think this is worth it? Or at the very least, if I could come up with some magic formula, and I can't, but if I could come up with some magic formula to really minimize, all but eliminate the fraud and the abuse and the waste, only people who really need the help and are doing their best and will get off of it as soon as they can, only those folks will get this redistribution. Would you be in favor of it then? Kind of perfect world situation. Can't do it, but if I could, would you say, okay, I'll sign up for that one? Well, if you like the idea of wealth redistribution, and I've got a good number of students who do in previous classes, then I think we can do something similar to make this class more fair and just. let's talk about grade redistribution. Here's what I think we're going to do. I'm trying to make this a fair class. I want it to be a just society within my classroom. And there's been a lot of students, especially since we've had to suddenly knock everyone into an online class, whether you wanted it or not, they've been having a hard time adapting. Now, I know some people have had online classes before. They know how it works, and they're just taking advantage of the situation. Oh, my internet's not working as I play very detailed online games with my spare time. But we also know there's other people that are really having trouble. We know there are people who live in the country, and the internet goes at about the pace of, well, the mailman, if that. So here's what I'm looking at, guys. If you take the next exam and you get a 65, we were hoping for a little better than that. How about this? How about I'm going to raise your score by 5 points, bring you up to a minimal C, bring you up to a 70. Maybe things were a little bit worse. You were only able to eke out a 60. Well, those in the greater need get greater assistance. So I'll give you 10 more points, and so on down the line. Guys, there's a limit. If you can't even get 40 points, if you get 10 points, I can't save everyone. I'm doing the best I can, but all the way down to those who score a 40, I am really considering trying to up your grade by as much as 30 points. Trying to help you guys through in this difficult time. What do you guys think of this grade redistribution? Giving more help to those who need it the most. Are there going to be a few people that take advantage of this? Are there going to be some people that don't try? Yeah, I guess so. I can't entirely rule that out. But that's just the cost of what it takes to help those who really are trying to do their best. What do you guys think? Are you willing to do it? Well, you realize this isn't just called grade increasing. This is called grade redistribution, which means all these points have to come from somewhere. Where are they going to come from? Well, they're going to come from the students who are doing better, of course. These are the wealthier students in the class, at least when it comes to their grade points. These are the impoverished students in the class when it comes to their grade points. So if you're doing a little bit better than average, a 75, that's good. You can afford to give a little bit. You can afford to have 5 of your points given to students who need it most. And of course, we'll increase it a little bit. If you're getting 100, and there were a number of you who got 100 on that first exam, you are way above what you need. This is an embarrassment of wealth when it comes to your grade. You can afford to give the most, so I'm going to ask you guys, for every 100 points you make, I want you to give 30 points to those in the greatest need. Are you guys happy with that? What do you think? Who's for grade redistribution? Come on, let's see your hands. Huh, it's funny, I can't see anyone's hands. I don't know what you think. Maybe you can kind of talk about what you think about the fairness and the appropriateness, the justness of grade redistribution on the discussion post, if you like. Might need a little bit of that extra credit to make up for all those points I'm taking away from you. I've had some students say, oh, come on, Hoofer, this is different. This doesn't count the same. I mean, money is important. People need money to live. Grades are just, And I say, yeah, you're right. I agree with you. Money is more important. So if you can take away someone's money and give it to someone else, if you can take away the more important stuff, clearly you can take away the less important stuff. Certainly we can take away your grade points. I mean, guys, once you get your degree, once you graduate and you've got your piece of paper that says you're smart, how many people are going to ask to see your grades? How many people are going to ask what your GPA was? Do you really need a bunch of A's? Don't be selfish. Try to help each other out. Maybe I'm asking a little bit too much here. 30 points out of every 100 points you make. We can negotiate this a little bit. How about this? So let's just imagine we're gonna do this in our minds. How many of you would be willing to give 30 points to the students in the greatest need out of every 100 points you make, raise your hand just to yourself or in your mind. Say, yeah, I'd be willing to do that. And I don't know what you guys are saying. I don't know how you respond to that, but I may have had one or two students in all the years I've done this. Virtually every single class, no one raises their hands. They're not willing to do it. And I say, okay, let's ease it back a little bit. Out of every 100 points you make, I'm only going to take away 20 points for those who need it the most. What does that mean? That means you'll still have a B. You're not going to be dropped all the way down to a 70. A B is more than you need to pass. A B is well into middle class. 80 points is pretty good. Are you willing to do that? And sometimes I have a couple of students, 2, 3, raise their hand, usually not more than that at most. I say, okay, but that's not going to be enough for everyone. We need to get more people involved. All right, how about this? How about for every 100 points you make, I'm not going to take away 30, not going to take away 20. I'm just going to take 10 points. I'm just asking for 10 measly points. You still got a 90. You still got an A, and you're helping out those who really need it the most. How many of you say, okay, 10 points, I'll help you out. I'm willing to contribute. And sometimes I've had up to 6 or 7 or maybe 8 students raise their hand and say, I'll give you 10 out of every 100. Many times it doesn't get that high. It's closer to 4 or 5. And then I say, okay, last question. How many of you say not 1 point? Those are my points. I worked hard for them. They belong to me, and no one should just take them away and give them to someone else, whether it's because they're lazy or whether they really need it. Those are my points. And maybe if I could choose who they went to and I could give them myself, maybe that'd be one thing. But no, I'm not trusting someone else to take my stuff and give it to someone else. Those points belong to me. How many of you are on that side? And every single class I've ever had, that's the majority, well over half the class. And I always look at them and I say, you greedy, no, never mind what I say. I can't say it now that I'm on tape. But anyway, the only reason I bring that up is just to show that it's kind of easy, or it's at least easier, to favor redistribution from the wealthy to the poor if I've only known one side of that all my life. If I've only grown up on the side that gets helped from it, it sounds really good to me. I like the idea, or at least I naturally am more likely to. If I'm on the other side and I've only been giving every time, well, it's not more natural that I wouldn't like it so much. So I just use this example to say, well, what if we change the example where maybe you're on the other side from what you're used to? Maybe you're a really good student and you've had a wealth of good grades. Are you willing to share that with others? If you're not willing to do that with your points, why should you expect other people to be willing to do it with their hard-earned money? And on the other hand, if you've been wealthy and affluent in society and you find yourself down here, would you really appreciate the help here? Would it really help you get through some hard times? Well, if so, then do you think that you who have been, for whatever reason, blessed or successful financially, should you be willing to help those in need? This is just a chance to let people kind of see it from the other side, the shoe on the other foot. Let me just say briefly, for all of you who thought 30 points out of 100, no way, that's too much. This is actually less than the proportion of the current tax code. At one time, the highest tax rates were 39.5%, almost 40%, and that was just for federal income tax. That didn't even count state tax and city tax. If you live in Los Angeles, California, I know people there, financially successful people, who say, I pay more than 50% of my income in taxes. I don't even see the other half of it. It has since been reduced. It's now down around 34%, but it's still higher than this. So, and I'm not saying that's good or that's bad. I'm just letting you know, if you thought this was too high, this is actually less high, less progressive than the current U.S. tax system. Well, there are some people that not just are they unhappy about the redistribution of wealth, they think they've worked hard for their money, and if they want to give it to someone else, that's fine, they can do it, but it shouldn't just be taken away and given to someone else by force. This leads us to the last of the three. And some people might ask, well, who could be against this best of both worlds? The rich get rich, but they help out the poor. You tax them a little bit more. Why would anyone object to that? Here's some people who do. They're going to be our last group, the untaxed inequality group. And this is why they object. Now, this is kind of I'm going to say I think it's kind of an over-the-top statement. Taxes equal financial slavery. Guys, I don't often give you my opinion. I'm seriously going to give it to you here. I think this is going too far. Slavery, at least as it was known as racial enslavements in the West for so long, that's a uniquely grievous act. I mean, people were treated as less than human just because of who their parents and grandparents were, out of no fault of their own. I think this is really an unfair comparison. I think this trivializes slavery. I knew of someone who was a professional football player in the NFL, and he was quite good and he made a lot of money, but nevertheless, he said, do you know how they treat us? You know how hard they work us? It's basically a slave trade in the NFL. And I thought to myself, don't say that. That trivializes slavery. I'll tell you why. Not only did slaves not get paid lots of money, slaves could not leave and retire and quit whenever they want. You can. If you can walk away whenever you want, you're not a slave. Don't trivialize and minimize what slavery was by comparing it to everything that you don't like, everything that you don't think is perfectly fair. It's kind of like people that compare everything they don't like to the Holocaust or everyone they don't like to the Nazis. By the time another Holocaust comes or real Nazis reappear, false comparisons will have been made so much that people will say, well, they're not that bad. So I myself think that this statement here is going too far. But I understand why they say it. They're borrowing from a Russian novelist, Leo Tolstoy. He made the statement, the essence of all slavery consists in this: taking the product of another's labor by force. They say, you do the work, I reap all the benefits, you get nothing. You get none of the benefits of your work, you get no compensation, you get no payment, you get nothing. That's the essence of slavery. Taking the produce of another's labor by force. And some people say that redistribution is approaching this. Again, I think slavery is an unfair comparison, an inappropriate comparison. But some people have said, you're right, that's too strong. How about, instead of saying slavery, what about saying redistribution is a type of theft? It's stealing. Stealing, really? Why do you think it's stealing? All kinds of countries, the United States, lots of countries engage in redistribution. Are you saying that they're stealing from their citizens? Why would you think that? This is their reasoning. They're going to say, well, we all know what theft is, but let's make it explicit. When you seize the fruit of another's labor without any compensation, that's theft. And guys, when the government redistributes wealth, what are they doing? It is literally the seizing of the fruit of some people's labor, namely the wealthy, for the benefit of others, namely the poor. It takes the fruit of their labor. What does that mean? That means that when the government redistributes wealth, it is engaging in theft. It is legal theft, but that doesn't mean that it's moral. Quick example, and I'm not saying this is the same thing as what the Nazis did. I'm just showing a comparison. Under Nazi law, Jews were not considered persons. And as such, Jews could not be legally murdered. Jews could not be legally robbed or stolen from. Someone could break into a Jewish shop, take stuff, and they could not be arrested for theft because you cannot steal from a non-person any more than you could steal, say, from a dog if you went out and took away a dog's bone. That's the way the Nazis treated them. So legally, the Jews were not persons. They had not the legal standing of personhood, but morally, it didn't change anything. And the argument here is perhaps legally, the government is engaging in theft, but that doesn't mean that it's morally acceptable. It's just legalized theft. But is it really? I mean, that's a strong, controversial claim. The government is stealing from some of you. If not now, then one day in the future, it will be stealing from you. And for some of you right now, some of you in the future, sometimes it will be taking what it's stolen and it will be giving some of it to you. Are you really either the victim or the beneficiary, or sometimes both, of legalized theft? What do you think? Is this also going too far? Are they just wrong? Are they overdoing it when they say that redistribution of wealth constitutes theft? I wonder what you guys think. Again, if this is something that interests you, if you want to have a take on this, feel free to put your thoughts about this in the discussion. So here's an objection that someone can give. They're going to say, you want to say it's theft? You want to say it's immoral, it's wrong? You don't realize what you're asking for. Guys, taxes, no one likes them when they're paying them. I grant that. But they make society so much better. Things run so much more smoothly. For example, when people pay for taxes, what does that go to? That goes to things that all of us need, all of us use. Everyone, Bill Gates needs to use roads. He doesn't build his own roads everywhere he wants to go. That pays for the schools that people send their children to. Not many people are going to build their own school and send their kids there. That pays for fire departments. Guys, that pays for the military. When the Canadians invade and send their hordes of Mounties down to the south to take over us, I don't want to be the only thing standing between them and their conquest. I want the military to defend myself and my property and all the rest of us. But if you're going to have a military, if you're going to have an army, you got to pay them. Who's going to pay the army? That's what taxes go into. We need taxes because they go into things that society needs. And guys, these are things that everyone uses. One could make the argument that the wealthy use these things and get more use of these things than the poor do in some cases. So here's what you can say. You can say, no, the government is not seizing people's wealth. It's not stealing from them. Why not? Because those people who pay taxes, they're being compensated. You're a wealthy guy who has a Ferrari dealership or sell Lamborghinis or some other expensive car. When your dealership catches fire, you're going to need that fire department to come and help you, and they're not going to be there if you don't have taxes. So no, it's not theft. How can we prove it? Because you're getting important service for those taxes. You guys are being compensated. Take that, you wealthy snobs. What do you guys think? Does this beat back the objection that says redistribution is a type of theft? I mean, to ask for a world without taxes, at first that may sound pretty good, especially as tax day is kind of approaching in April, or it's usually in April. I'm not sure how things have changed now. But if you just stop and imagine a little bit, what would society be like if there were no taxes, if there were no public institutions, if there were no police departments? Are you really going to be better off, or do you say it's worth it? It's a price I'm willing to pay. Well, what do the taxes, or I should say redistribution is a type of theft, folks, respond to this? Or to put it more clunky, what do the untaxed inequality folks answer to this? Well, They're going to start off by saying, you know what, you guys are largely right. In fact, we agree with you. When you're talking about general taxes, what are those? Those are things that everyone gets to use. Those are things that pay for things we can all make use of, like roads, like fire departments. They're there for all of us. You guys are right. Those are better for society. We get compensated as we use them. Those are not theft. All right, then you guys have lost. Game over, right? They said, not quite yet. There's a difference between general taxes and redistribution. Those are not the same thing. General taxes, they pay for things that we all are able to use and enjoy. Redistribution takes only from some, the wealthy, and gives it only to others. So what does that mean? That means redistribution is not compensating the guy who owns the Lamborghini dealership. I am not getting, if I own the Lamborghini dealership, I am not getting compensated for all that money that goes to Mr. Sloth out there. It's just gone. And I hope he uses it well. I hope he uses it to get better off. I hope he's not just going out and buying a bunch of beer and lottery tickets. I don't know. But either way, whether he's blowing it all on beer, cigarettes, and lottery tickets, or whether he's trying to go back to school and to re-educate himself, get himself a new skill set so that he can become successful, either way, he's doing that with my money if I'm the Lamborghini dealer. And if I wanted to give him some of the money and try to help him out, that's my prerogative. That allows me to exercise the choice of doing a moral, kind, compassionate thing. But if someone just comes away and takes it away from me and says, I'm going to give it to someone else, whether you like it or not, that takes away my choice to be kind. That takes away my choice to be compassionate. That takes away money that I worked for. That takes away the fruit of my labor. And it does so without compensation. That's theft. At least that's what they say. Let me give an example that I would have done in class. I would have picked someone, and then I would have picked another person. I'm thinking of names that I might have gone over. I'm not gonna say them here. But let's imagine, as you're listening to me, imagine I picked you to be the first part of this example, and I say, imagine that you're off, you live in your house, you've got a fair amount of money, you're doing well, and this other member of the class secretly follows you home one night, holding a baseball bat, comes into your house, threatens you with it, catches you unexpectedly, and suppose this other classmate takes as much of your stuff as they can carry, they threaten you, and they make off with a bunch of your stuff. And you were unable to stop them. Question: have you just been robbed? And everyone that I've asked that of before, in all my previous classes, they all say, yeah, I've been robbed. I say, okay. But what if things were a little bit different? It wasn't this other classmate who came in. Rather, the classmate got all the other students in the class, and they all came to your house with baseball bats and crowbars and various other basic weapons, and they all threatened to mess you up bad. And they loot you, take whatever they can carry, get away, leaving you behind. Have you still been robbed? And every student has says, well, yes, of course I've been robbed. Whether one person does it or whether a mob does it, I've still been robbed. Oh, okay. Well, suppose it's a little bit different. Suppose suppose the class decides to go out and hire a thug. This is where I come in. So they tell me, they say, Hooford, we want you to go over to this person's home. We want you to take as much as you can, bring it to us. We'll give you the biggest cut, suppose. So I do that. I show up at your home with my cigar, blow smoke in your face, and say, I've got an offer you no can refuse. And you can hear me now. Hear that? Hear that? That's me snapping my suspenders. All the best gangsters have suspenders. So you know that I mean business. So it's not been just some person, it's not just been some other person, it's not been the whole class. They hired a thug to go out, take a bunch of your money, give it to them, take his own cut. Have you still been robbed this time? And everyone says, yeah, just because they got some professional criminal to do it doesn't mean it's any less robbery. I see. Last one. This time, suppose they don't come themselves, they don't hire a thug. Suppose this time everyone gets together and votes. And they all elect a politician. And they tell the politician, so and so, you over there, has a whole bunch of money. We want some of it. Send the IRS, escort with the police if you have to their house, and take a portion of their money, come give it to us. And if you do a good job, we'll vote for you again. So the tax agents show up. Suppose they show up with armed guards. And they say, good to see you. Hope you're doing okay. We're here to take $30 out of every $100 you have, or whatever it may be. So if you'll please write us the check, we'll be on our way. And if you don't do it, we will arrest you. After all government compulsion is ultimately at the end of a gun. It may not start that way, but if you're going to force people to do what you want them to do, you've got to be able to use force. So people vote, and the government comes and says, we're going to take a chunk of money, and we're going to give it to those who voted for us. Last question, have you been robbed this last time? And I have had a couple of students that say, no, not this time. This time it's different. This was not theft. This was not robbery. But the vast, vast majority have said, yeah, I do not see a significant moral difference in any of these cases, including the one where the government comes and takes my money without my consent and gives it to others. If that's not theft, if that's not robbery, I'm not sure why it is when the thug does it. I'm not sure why it is when the mob does it. Where's the morally significant difference? Now, maybe you think there is one. Again, this might be something that you might express on the discussion if you think that we're missing something here. Let me just talk about something real quick. We actually are coming towards the end. We're winding down. Here's a question. Just follow this. If it's moral to force some, namely the wealthy, to pay for others' well-being, after all, we don't want people to be too badly off. We want them to be as well off as we can reasonably make them. But you realize not everyone has the spare money to do that. But almost everyone has some spare time and some spare labor that they could use for that way. Why not then? Why not say it's moral to force some to labor for others' well-being? Maybe you don't have a whole bunch of money sitting around that you can use to help the less fortunate, but you can go out, you can sweep streets. You can go out, you can do some hard work, you can serve your fellow man. So if we can force some to pay for the well-being of others, why not take those who can't and force them to work for the well-being of others? But some of you are already ahead of me. Some of you said, whoa, Hooford, hold on a second. Force some to labor for others? We have a term. We have a very specific word that we use when we're talking about forced labor. And you all know what it is. That's called slavery. You're right. But the question is, if forcing someone to labor without compensation is slavery, then these last folks, these third group of people are going to come back and say, then tell me why this is not the case. Isn't it just obvious that forcing someone to pay without compensation is theft? And if you think it's not, especially if the government says it's okay, then why can't we say the same thing about government forced labor? Got to admit, this is a bit of a tough nut to crack. It's not obvious how someone breaks out of this and says, no, it's not theft, totally different. I mean, there are ways people will try. I've read about some of them, but it's not easy. It's going to take some work. If you don't like this, you could fight against it. You could show why it's still not theft. But let me just show you, there might be an easier way. Maybe it's theft, maybe they're right, but it might still be morally justified. What do we mean by that? Even if we admit, okay, redistribution is a type of theft, that doesn't automatically mean that it's morally wrong, even if it is a type of theft. You might be able to admit it's theft without saying it's wrong. Well, how? How can you do that? Well, let's use an example. For example, when someone lies to the Nazis trying to hide and save the lives of some Jews, that is lying. No one questions that. They're telling lies. But almost everyone, except for Immanuel Kant and the deontologists, almost everyone would say that lie is morally justified. It's okay to do it. In fact, many people would say you should do it. It's a good thing to lie in these circumstances. It is a lie, but it's not wrong. Well, maybe you could say the same thing about redistribution. Maybe you could admit, yeah, it is a type of theft, but maybe it's morally justified, at least in some circumstances. Again, Jean Valjean breaks into a bakery, could have taken the cash register, could have taken a whole bunch of stuff, but he takes one small loaf of bread to feed his starving sister and her children. Was that theft? Yes. Was it justified? That's harder. Maybe. Couldn't he have asked? Could he have done something else? Maybe he could have, but if this really was the only way to save their lives, to keep them alive, is it morally justified theft? If this type of redistribution is really the only way to keep some people from dying of something like pneumonia or some sort of simple infection that could have been easily treated, does that mean that even if it is theft, that it's morally justified? Well, I leave that to you. So basically, and this will not be part of the second exam, this will be for the final exam. The question here basically comes down to saying, and we know this is overly simplified, but these are three different interpretations of how society should redistribute wealth. One says it should be redistributed to make everyone as equal as possible. Another side says it should be redistributed a little bit, not too much, but enough so that the wealthiest have to help out the poorest. Whether they want to or not, they are required to help. Not an option. And then there's the third one that we've just finished looking at, which says we're not going to force anyone to help. You certainly can if you want. There are charities aplenty. If you want to help out people out of the kindness of your heart, go for it. But we're not going to force you to do it. It will be your decision. You can opt out. Of these three broad categories, which society do you think is the most just? What is the best society? And maybe another way to look at that is, which one would you want to live in the most? All right, when we come back next time, we're going to begin to consider the question of moral value, specifically of animals. Do animals count morally? If so, how much? Do we have any duties to them? Are there things that we may not do to them no matter how much we may enjoy it? That'll come up next time. And I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your time till the next class. See you later. Nope, I won't see you later, but I will talk to you later.